everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out. Welcome to Show and Tella with Saint Stella. Yes, I went with that name. I just did. Thank you all so much for hanging out tonight. I'm really excited about this show. I don't know if you hung out last week, but I had just an amazing conversation with Alval and Daniel Snyder, and we just talked about art, and we jammed out, and I felt inspired after, and it's just so, I feel like it's something we've missed, and something we haven't prioritized over the last year and a half, or whatever it is at this point. You know, we're all just out here trying to survive, trying to do what we need to do. But little things like meeting up with your friends and talking about what they're working on and what art they're doing and stuff like that, that seems sort of like insignificant sometimes, but we forget, I think, how actually important it is, how important it is for me anyways, and I really, really honor my fellow artists and my fellow creators and what they're doing and what they're still trying to do in this like world that has deprioritized that so much. So I'm going to bring on two amazing people tonight who create, both of them are here in Toronto, and we're just going to talk about art. We're going to talk about what we're making, and I'm going to ask them about like what they're doing now, what they create, what that means to them, maybe some blocks that they've been having, and we'll just jam out. So if you're hanging out in chat, feel free to pop some questions in chat. Feel free to, let us know what you're thinking, what you're making, and we'll just jam on it. On that note, I'm gonna bring in my first guest, and I'm gonna do it, I don't know, I guess alphabetically. So first of all, I'm gonna bring in my friend and yours, Alice Rose. Hi.
Hey, hello.
How's it going?
When you said alphabetically, it took me a second. It was like, does L become before S? Is
Me
it
too.
First name, last name? Oh no.
I was literally like, which one? AIDS? I don't know. Whatever.
I'm so glad. Yeah, it takes a little moment. Not so good with the math these days.
The math and or the letters?
Right.
Don't worry about it.
Wow, I'm definitely not good with the math.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do right now is awkwardly read your bio while you're watching me do it. How do you feel about that? Okay. And you can react and do.
Is it the really long one? Oh no.
It's the really it's sort of short. Okay. But I'm going to read it with a lot of conviction, and it's going to be awesome because I was excited to read it. I'm not even joking. Okay. Because I don't joke. That's your job. Okay, anyways.
Leave it to the pros.
Right? I know, sorry. Okay. So, Alice Rose, who you're looking at, their beautiful face right now, is a transgender comic fueled by third wave coffee and, okay, tell me if I'm saying this right, estradiol?
Estradiol.
Yeah,
for sure. It's the little green pill that gives me titties and soft hair.
Oh, that sounds nice, actually. A lot of people could use that pill. A storyteller at heart, Alice combines introspective personal narratives with larger observations to create an intimate comedy experience. Alice's career highlights include having opened for Colin Mockery and Elvira Kurt, who I love, and producing Gender Outlaws, a showcase of trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming comedians for JFL 42. And she's competed in Comedian of the North, that sounds very dramatic, and was recently nominated for an I Heart Jokes Award. You'll have to tell me what that is. Alice is also the founder of Comic Sans Productions, close to my heart, Canada's first and only production company and comedy talent agency to promote exclusively LGBTQ plus performance artists. Huge. As the world begins to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, fingers crossed, Alice is busy preparing for an upcoming Western Canada tour. I want to hear about how a tour planning is going right now to promote her first album, Girl Dick. I said Dick, even though it started out. We're going to say Dick. Due to be released on Howl and Roar Records in early 2022. Alice. You're like frozen.
I think I'm totally frozen, yes.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah.
I put all your links in the chat. Do you want to? Okay, this is what we're going to do because I've planned it this way. It's fine. How about I'll switch you out for my second guest, and then I'm sure once you come back, you'll be all refreshed.
Sounds good.
Okay, amazing. Ashley T for my next guest. Hello, how's it going?
Hello. It's going really well. I'm really excited for tonight.
I'm going to quiz you. It's going to be amazing. But first, I'm going to read your bio while looking you right in the eye.
Okay.
As a young, black, biracial, bisexual woman with with type 2 bipolar disorder from Toronto, Ashley has coined herself the bifecta, I love that, of intersections. As a result, she creates her art under the name Bifusion Arts. She's a multidisciplinary artist with skills spanning from visual art, including acrylic paintings, to literary art, including short stories and poetry, which we'll hear some of tonight, to performance art, including spoken word and burlesque. She uses art to ground herself and remind herself of the power she possesses to be a positive change in the world. So good. That's what art is for. Each piece she creates is a small chapter of her visual memoir. I love that idea. Tell me really quick, I have more questions, but I really want to just focus on that for a second. What do you mean by visual memoir?
Basically it's that for so long, I have so many stories, I have so much to say, I have so much in me that I've kept it to myself for so long because of different factors of not having the right kind of support. And I've just basically said, fuck it. And it's, I'm not writing down a memoir, I'm presenting it to the world by either creating paintings, by doing performances, by getting on a stage, by speaking my words and sharing my poetry. It's people being able to take snapshots and live in that moment with me. And it's just small chapters of my life. And rather than buying it at Indigo, come pay me personally and you can come be part of that memoir.
Um, so you find, I find that really interesting because we can look at art in so many ways, right? Art can be a fantasy, art can be, but you find that a lot of your art is sort of almost like a journal. You're putting your experiences out there in these different ways.
For sure. A lot, especially my visual art, has a piece of my soul in it. It's most of my work. I do some fun stuff just because, but most of my work is very deep in its meaning. It has to talk about my race, it has to talk about my interactions racially with the world. It talks about my bisexuality, bisexual erasure, and it talks about being a mad woman. It talks about how I navigate through the world and how these three identities intersect and either benefit me or put me at a disadvantage. And it's communicated in all of the pieces that I put out.
I love that. Okay, we're gonna follow up, but I'm gonna bring Alice back on and do group chat. Group chat. Okay, you're good.
I'm back.
Yay! And I want to ask you real quick, just one question about your bio, and then we're gonna go into the deep shit. You're planning a tour right now? Is that still on, and how's that going?
I not in preparation of the album release yet,
Hmm.
but or anymore, but in following up on the album release. So it'll
Okay.
be a little later than originally expected. It was supposed to be in late August,
Oh,
but yeah,
life
it was
still as
a
it is.
high anticipation. Yeah, but I do have a special taping coming up on August 13th with Out TV. So
Oh.
I will be featured on Out TV. So that kind of makes up for it.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have
Hmm.
to risk getting on planes and stuff, because that still feels a little ish to me. You know?
Yeah, I was surprised by how normalized I was by jumping on planes and traveling
Okay.
because this month, because Toronto's closed and I need to prepare for this taping. So I spent a week in Montreal and a week in
Oh.
Ottawa so far this month. And um, yeah, it's surprising how quickly I normalized to just being with people again. Still quite a lot of anxiety, but not nearly as much as I thought I would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing, and we can go into this more, but the whole COVID thing, right? I don't know about y'all, but I'm double vaxxed. So I feel pretty safe, actually, going out in public myself. But it's not even in a way medical anymore. It's like having spent a year and a half not doing those things. So they feel weird again, you know? And
Hmm.
still. still being mindful as a person, like not just like rolling into a place without a mask or like whatever. And to me, it's less about like my personal like medical fears, but more about the like testing the waters about being in public again.
Oh, I can
Yeah.
absolutely relate to that. That's what it is. That's where the anxiety comes from because I don't feel unsafe anymore.
Yeah.
I still take all the precautions I necessarily would, but I've done the research. It's airborne, so surfaces are not as high of a risk as we originally thought. Outdoor activities are not as high of a risk as we originally thought. So I'm feeling comfortable that way. However, first of all, it's exhausting. Just people is exhausting. And then having to keep a schedule and arrange like your calendar, and I'll actually meet you in person on this date and this time. It's a lot to take on right away. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm exhausted with a half the schedule that I had before the pandemic happened.
Completely. Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a lot more that goes into it. Like I put off my dentist appointment 3 times, and then it was scheduled and I was gonna keep it, and then I was like, actually, this is taking place a day before my 2 weeks of my second vaccine is over. I called them. I was like, please, can we move it?
Yeah.
You're going to be in my face. You're going to be in my bubble. I don't like it. And they were super accommodating for it. But it's just, it's all the stuff that we took for granted pre-COVID that it's going to take a little while of just being able to get close to other people again, and especially people who aren't our immediate family,
Hmm.
and just be able to go about our business. For those of us who had anxieties over COVID, the other people who were eating on patios all the time and reinfecting the population, you have your own fun. But yeah, the people who were responsible and got their double vaccinations, if their bodies would allow for it, I think we're all kind of in the same boat of we're ready to face the world, but from a different angle.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
relearning. Like habits are formed, right? Apparently in whatever it is, 28 days, right? So we formed all these new habits. This is not a COVID talk. We're not going to do this for very long, just saying. But we formed new habits. Like COVID aside, we formed new habits that don't involve going into packed bars and doing whatever it was we used to do. So reforming what that means, I think has been really interesting, especially as performers, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Like the fact that like doing burlesque itself, of being that close, being naked or half naked in a back room with 5 performers and you're in a closet, yeah, that's not happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's something that we have to learn to accommodate, or just learn how to deal with it for the future. It's gonna be a conversation, definitely.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Let's forget about COVID. I mean, it might come up again because this is the world we live in. It's fine. But okay, we're gonna start over. I kind of want to start by just getting to know you, and for anybody watching, I'd like to know a little bit about where you're from. If you're okay with telling, well, we know you're from Toronto, but sort of maybe where you grew up. But mostly, I kind of want to know, for both of you, this could be a big list, but tell me sort of what you make, what you're focusing your energies on, what you have made, and what you're looking forward to sort of working on in the next like immediate future. Whoever wants to jump in.
Ashley, I can let you take the reins.
Sure. Born and raised downtown Toronto. Um, undisclosed location still in Toronto.
Sure. I'm not going to be like, tell me your address.
Yeah, it's at this intersection.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I've always lived in Toronto my whole life, just kind of the outskirts of, lived in several different apartments. I moved out at 19 and just kind of went from end to end all around.
Hmm.
But in terms of my art, oh God, the list is long. So multidisciplinary artist, as you said through my bio, I do visual art, spoken word, burlesque, dance, and literary art. I'm currently working on trying to curate my own exhibition and present my visual art. So my hopes is that I will be able to get a space to do an exhibition I want to call Enter the Bifecta. And
Nice.
it's to welcome people into meeting my intersectional identities and how they flourish and how they wilt amongst other people within those communities. Because one thing about my identity as the bifecta is that I'm often too much and not enough at the same time. That both sides of the communities that I belong to accept me into the community when it's beneficial to them, and then forget I exist when I do nothing for them. And like one of the pieces I'm working on is called Making Space, and that has to do with being part of the queer community as a bisexual woman, and the erasure that I feel, and the erasure as a Black woman that I feel within the queer community, and the forgetfulness that queer people tend to have around those of us who are mad. So that's a whole piece that I'm working on. And I'm also, because of the pandemic, I started my own community initiative called Bountiful Pride. And that is for Black, queer, and trans folks over the age of 30 from Toronto, because basically there's no programming for us.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of Black focused programming, but there's also just really no programming for people who are over the age of 29. And so I got bored with not having anything for myself, so I decided to build it, and I got a few grants under my belt and was able to start building that up. That right now, it started on July 7th and it goes until August 15th. I'm running the Art of Blackness workshops. That it's 12 different workshops spanning from visual art, literary art, and performance art. And we invite local Black community leaders to lead the charge. Like one of the people I have that I'm so grateful for is Raven Wings. And she is doing our final one on August 15th called Sachet and Slay, where she's going to teach us attitude and poise and how to strut down the catwalk. And heels are optional, but it's still just about building this confidence within yourself. And that's basically what the whole premise of Bountiful Pride is creating community and creating a confidence, especially since COVID has taken us away from each other. And then, yeah, I want Alice to go soon. There's a ton of other stuff, and if you want to know more, just ask me pointedly. But I want to hear
will.
from Alice.
There are follow-ups. Alice, same. What do you where are you from? And what are you sort of
Yeah.
focusing your energies on nowadays?
Get settled in. Let's do this. All right. The year was 1984. No, I'm not that old, please.
No.
No, it was a reference to my favorite novel. That's it.
Sure, yeah.
I was born in Northern Ontario, and my family moved around a lot within Canada. So I'm fortunate enough to have grown up in like diverse communities on the East Coast, West Coast, Northern Canada. Often around and close to Indigenous communities. So I'm blessed to have been given a good knowledge of Indigenous history and Indigenous culture that I'm really proud of. Having moved around a lot, it took me a while to finish high school, but in my early to mid 20s, I started pursuing post-secondary. I was a theater student in high school. I went to a magnet school, and then I switched to graphic design, and then philosophy and history, and then architecture. Just natural progression, right? And then I said, fuck it all, and became a woman and a comedian. Yeah.
Keep moving, just keep moving.
Yeah, between history, philosophy, and architecture, I had an opportunity to work for an NGO in East Africa. So I lived in Uganda for a year, and I worked with human rights NGOs and human rights advocates. So, and that was a natural following of just sort of my advocacy nature and my desire to advocate and speak for other people. So when I started doing stand-up comedy, it was short, like very early into my transition. So for me, it was a way to express all the weird shit that was happening to me, and also create a sense of visibility and a sense of inclusion, because if people are laughing with me, then maybe they'll think I'm an okay person, and maybe trans people aren't that bad after all.
Maybe.
Maybe, who knows? We have yet to see. But yeah, in the stand-up community and in the performance art community, obviously, straightness, cisgenderness, whiteness, um, attractiveness are all things that sort of play into account. I learned this pretty early on and decided I need to create a space for myself and for queer people. And then that's when 3 years ago I started a little show and created Comic Sans Productions, which continued to grow. And develop this mandate of inclusivity and accessibility that I'm very passionate about. So that shifted me to a larger focus outside of just queer people, but people living with disabilities, people of color, any underrepresented people, people with mental illness, and all of these things. So underrepresented people who are just incredibly talented people, but just naturally sort of overlooked in the
Hmm.
booking process and in the promotion process. So um, yeah, so Comic Sans and my stand-up comedy are all about speaking about topics that are important to me, um, improving visibility and accessibility for myself and the ability to tell my stories, and then for others as well, and highlighting them and lifting them up along with me.
Yeah, I love that. So this is sort of off the topic, but both of you, I think, use this word a lot. I love the word queer. It's like my favorite word, right? Because it can mean so many things, right? It can mean genderqueer. It can mean queer in terms of your sexuality. Queer to me still just means weird. And I love that. Queer means off center. Queer means not typical. And I love the many ways that like so many people can take that word back and love it. Like I love identifying as queer because to me queer can be so many things.
Right. I resonate with that quite a bit too, because as somebody who, you know, I sexually identify as I don't know. Like I really I'm not a very big decision maker when
Hmm.
it comes to gender, sexuality, societal norms, anything like that. And
School, it
labels,
seems,
yeah,
careers.
school, careers, um even how I identify with my mental health and my mental illness, where I don't feel that anxiety, depression, ADHD tell the whole story for me. So
Right.
there's um, sort of intellectual queerness or neurodivergence or
Hmm.
neurodiversity going on, and that's something that I attach to, where it's like it's different for me, and I like to feel special.
You know.
That that's the perfect word. That's what queer means for me. It's special because I
Mhm.
used to not use that word for a very long time because it felt very othering, because way back when you would say, "Oh, what are you, a queer?" and that it was met with disgust, and it was othering and belittling of gay, bi, trans, lesbian, and other people. And so for the longest time it really hurt me that people used it around me. And then as I got more comfortable in my own skin and I started taking up more space and I started giving less fucks about what anyone else had to think about me, I really liked using that word because I removed the meaning of weird and I gave it the meaning of special.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I like using that word because it saves my voice box from having to go through the entire alphabet mafia, but I still want to be inclusive of
Yeah.
everyone in the alphabet mafia. Um, and don't get me wrong, there are folks who still don't use the word, and if they use a word with me that they're like, I don't want to be called queer, I will use their word,
Sure.
of
Of course.
course. But in my own space, I am bisexual, especially when I need to make it very clear I'm bisexual, so I don't get lost in the mix because of erasure.
Mm.
But if it's not important at that time and there's no erasure and there's no stand I need to make, I'm a queer woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud to say I'm a queer woman. The same way I'm very proud to say I'm a bisexual woman.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
I
I'm
think
Yeah.
words and language, right? Especially as people who've come from places where I imagine you both have, where language has been used against you. It's really important to own your own language, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I feel like we could get off talking. Even before we started, we were just talking about all these amazing things. And okay, I want to center this around art, but I do think that like all, our experiences very much like inform our art. So feel free to go off topic, but I'd love to know from both of you. I love this question. Like again, we'll probably start a huge conversation, but I love for you both of you to tell me about your artistic process. And this is quite literal. I would love to know where your ideas come from, when. This is a question I asked last week as well, but I love this is going to be a question I ask all the time. Where your ideas come from, how you write comedy, for example, or how a performance piece comes to you, or whatever it may be. And do you assign a time in the day to focus on your art? Are you just like, oh, ideas come to me in the shower and then I write it down? Or what is your artistic process, I guess, in a nutshell? And do you regulate that process at all, or is it this sort of like free flowing thing that happens? And again, whoever wants to jump in, go for it.
Alice, you can take it first.
Sure. My creative process is um, just like my sexual and gender identity. I don't know. It's it's something that I haven't really refined yet, but it all comes from the same place. Whether it's comedy, whether it's opinion pieces, whether it's essays, whether it's journal entries or poetry. Um, I consider myself a writer at heart, and
Mm.
when there's a story that leans into being a joke or a story that's something that I can play with and explore, um, you know, concepts and some versions um, and this playful aspect, then I will write it. I'll write what I want to say, and then I'll try to distill all of the humor and all of the funny out of it.
Mm.
And then when it's poetry, the funny usually slips in as well a little bit, but I like a little poem that can make you laugh. But it seems more heartfelt and more emotion processing than situation processing. And then when somebody pisses me off on the internet, I write an op-ed piece or I write a
Nice.
really long journal entry, and those sometimes make me a couple dollars here and there too. So yeah, but for me, the creative process usually comes out of an emotional reaction. So when something happens that's like, this was amazing, I want to write about it, I want to tell people about it. When something happens that's like, this is tragic,
Mm.
um, I still, it's just a motivator to start writing and to continue writing. And that's just to get the ideas out. But in terms of crafting and refining, a lot of my writing is done on stage,
Mm.
which is to say I haven't written anything in the last year and a half. But a lot of the writing happens on stage in the moment when you're playing with those ideas. A lot of the time, I will give myself where I want to start
Mm.
and then where I want to end up. And the middle, how I get from one to the other, is a very playful process and seeing what works with the audience and what happens using the energy of the performance and the stage. But like everybody else, I have an hour a day where I sit with my journal and I write. And if it comes out as something funny, if it comes out as something
Mhm.
insightful, something completely self indulgent, I allow myself to do that.
I love that. Not as
Hmm.
like I feel like that's something I need to start doing because I value people. I think that's so useful that you're like, well, everybody journals for an hour a day. No, we don't though. Like we should, but we don't. So I feel like that's a thing that like yeah, that would make, I think, a lot of us more like thoughtful people and more even potentially artistic people, depending. But yeah, I love that. That like, so your creative process is sort of all over the place, except you have that hour a day that you focus on the things you want to get from here to paper or to pixels or whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And in that writing process, I can document the things that I want to talk about. And then I'm thinking about them and I'm processing them throughout the day. So then I can open up my notes app in my phone and think about like a funny little quip or a funny way or an interesting way or a new perspective to tackle that topic. So that's how I do it. I actually have an enormous pad of paper, like in like a boardroom, the big paper
Oh, okay.
pads.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I have the word gender in the middle circled, and I just try to do mind map of like how far I can get away from assumptions about gender,
Ah,
and
cool.
that helps to generate some material as well. So my opening line, I just saved a bundle of my car insurance by switching to female. Um, Line
I
about how
mean,
I sexually identify as an attention whore, um, stuff about being bisexual and sexuality and things like that. So it all kind of comes out of this one core concept of gender.
and it's so interesting. Like, okay, yeah, okay. Okay. I'm gonna move to Ashley because I kind of want to be like, let me follow up on every single point you just said. We don't have time for
Right.
that shit. We don't have time for that shit. Ashley, tell me about your creative process. Like, do you have a schedule? Do you have a time when you do it? Tell me.
Um, I only keep a schedule if I have a project with a deadline.
Mm.
If it's just creating art for the sake of creating art, God, no. I have enough schedules in my life. I'm an extremely organized person, and that's not what art is supposed to be for me. I want to remove the work aspect from it.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, if someone's commissioned me to do something, then I know I have to keep to a particular schedule so it'll dry in time and so I can seal it in time and this and the other. But if I'm just creating to create, no, there's no schedule involved. It's a matter of depends on which medium you're talking about. For poetry, um, for years I used to sleep with a pen and a notebook under my bed because I'm an insomniac. So what is sleep? I would wake up, which means I would sit up and and just have a phrase or just a word in particular that I knew had to be part of my storytelling. So how Alice said that at heart she is a writer, I'm a storyteller, and I
Mm.
just use all the mediums to create that memoir.
Mm.
And yeah, so for poetry, would have a notebook right under my bed, would scribble down some notes. Sometimes I would get full poems out of it. And when it comes to painting, because I'm an abstract painter, uh, there sometimes I'll approach the canvas and say, this is going to be about Black Lives Mattering. And that's what I want to create. And I will, I know that no matter what, I want a triangle in it. And then once I create that triangle, it'll flow out. I let the colors guide me. I let the way that my hand is holding the paintbrush guide me. Sometimes I finger paint and just feel the paint and just let it tell me what it's going to end
Mm.
up as. And other times it's a little more regimented. So if it's a stage performance, if it's a dance or something like that, um, then I'll focus more on the media that I'm borrowing from. So like for burlesque, if I'm listening to a song and I'm going to perform to that song, I don't do the very obvious, like, if the lyric is, what time is it? I don't do this. But I will let that line speak to me of what time is it mean to me? Am I trying to speak about the confusion I have because no one knows what time it is because of the pandemic? Or am I trying to look at it from an aspect of, I'm really late to meet a friend and will this destroy our friendship? That sort of thing. And I get introspective with it and use that to guide my art. So this is a really long-winded bullshit way of saying I don't know either. Uh, it's all over the place. It has to do with mood. It has to do with if I'm dealing with some artist block, if I've had a series of inspiration because I've just gone through like a week of inspiring workshops, and I've learned things from other artists and I can take that home with me. It really depends. Sometimes I try to create because I know it's good for me, I know it's good for my soul, and it comes out as total shit that I will paint over again and I will scratch out and I will pretend it never existed. And then there are other times where I start out thinking I'm not going to create something that I care much about, and I leave it alone for a day, for a week sometimes, and I'll come back at it and I'll be like, actually, no, I'm pretty proud of this because I know that it was created in a point of adversity in my life and I was able to form something positive and beautiful. And yeah, it's pretty damn good. Yeah. And like, shucks, I'm pretty good.
Shucks. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Gee golly.
This seems okay. So I will say so far of the four people I've talked to, 3 out of 4 are just like, I don't know. I just make shit when
We're
it
artists.
happens.
We're not supposed to know.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think it's interesting because there are some artists I've talked to who are like super regimented and they have, I mean, I think some of that might come with a certain amount of privilege because if you're able to spend, like, if I could spend 6 hours a day creating whatever stories or dance or whatever it may be, then I would do that, right? But most of
Mhm.
us don't have that kind of privilege to carve out that time in the day. So we take whatever time our hours awake lying in bed, our time between work, our breaks, our whatever, to make the art. So I think that's a commonality because we're in a way we're forced to do it that way. I think a lot of us. I might be wrong, but
Yeah,
That's a
that's
really
my
good point,
existence.
and sorry, that's a really good point, and that's what I attribute to my journaling too, is that I don't have a day job, and this is my career. This is what I do for a living. So I do have the time that I can schedule an hour a day to journal. And yes, it definitely came from a privileged place to say, like everybody, I journal for an hour a day. like like everybody, I park my Lexus on the left garage, not the right garage.
'cause that's for my Mercedes. Like
Yes,
everybody.
exactly.
I don't know. I've never driven a car. That's a good car, right? I don't know. Okay. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is I'm gonna take you each, I don't know, whoever wants to go first, but I have a little bit of work from each of you that I'd like to show, and then maybe we can talk about it. Does anybody, okay, this is actually a good question. Does anybody need a quick break, either of you? And then I'll do the other one first. Or,
I'm good.
Sure, I could take a break, a
okay.
very quick.
So Alice, I'll pull you out and we'll talk to Ashley a bit and show a bit of her stuff for a few minutes, and then we'll pull you back in and swap if that's cool.
Sounds good.
Okay, amazing. Let me do this. Okay, so I there's a few things I wanted to show of yours, so you can kind of tell me your preference on the order you want to talk about it. But I have the teaser from your Colorful Existence burlesque act, not the act itself, but the teaser, and I would like to talk about that experience. I have a few of your visual art pieces, and then I would love for you to be able to share some of your poetry. Do you have a preference for like the order you'd like to share that?
Um, let's go let's go with visual art first, and then we can do colorful existence, and then we'll do poetry.
Okay, I'm gonna pull up. So there's a bit of a slideshow. You'll see it in a moment. With the 3 pieces you showed me today. So we've got this sort of like rainbow sort of like, it looks like hieroglyphs or something to me. We've got the like tree sketch. To me, that's what it looks like. And then we've got sort of the I guess it's sort of like a multimedia sculpture piece of
Yeah,
what to me looks like a turtle. Um,
tortoise
so
actually.
it's a what? It's a
Tortoise.
tortoise. Okay, amazing. So those three are on screen right now. Maybe you can tell me about, in any order you like. Maybe you can tell me about where they each came from.
Yeah, sure. So I guess we'll start with the painting. Colorful Rhythm. There is an artist in the GTA who is Cheryl Ann. She is reaching out to local artists within the GTA to put on basically like this cool docu series. She did one last year that she just wants to feature artists and have a conversation. It's kind of like this, but what we do is it's called Artists in the Park.
Mm.
We meet her out in the world somewhere in some like beautiful green space and we create. And it doesn't matter what your medium is. There's some sculptors, there are visual artists who do paintings and sketches and stuff like that. And she puts together a video of her interviewing us and talking about the piece, and just to get our names out there, just to have people know about more emerging and local artists. And she's doing all of this without any funding
Mm.
because unfortunately it's one of those really cool projects that doesn't fall under any government funding title. So that's unfortunate, but it was a really wonderful experience for me. And this is the piece that I created out of it. I spoke a lot about how I'm very proud of being queer, how I faced a lot of adversity growing up being a bisexual woman, especially not just the fact that I was queer, the fact that I was bisexual, because I was told things like you could choose to be normal and all of that nasty rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't tell, I like keeping a lot of rainbows in my house. I like that it's super queer, but it's also just this beautiful splash of color that reminds me that there are different people in this world, that I'm allowed to be a different
Mm.
person and I'm allowed to be any color I want that day and I can change. And so with this, I wasn't even sure where I was going with it. I just knew I wanted to do a rainbow. Um, and with it, I just started doing these pieces that kind of matched up, but they're their own hieroglyphs, they're their own shapes. And it's kind of how I feel about society, is that we're all doing our own thing, but we all kind of just mesh together.
Mm.
And so there's this rhythm amongst us. And this is actually one of those pieces that I said, oh, I hate it. And then I left it for a day and I was like, no, I actually like it. It's cool.
It
Um,
reminds me like a little bit of Keith Haring, like
a
that kind of
little bit,
vibe,
a
like
little
of
bit.
this sort of like, I don't know, that definitely, like, there's a bit of a rhythm, dancing, sort of everything sort of fitting
Yeah.
into this zone, dancing around vibe that I
And
definitely,
Keith always put movement into his piece.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I actually earlier in the summer did a workshop with someone and they spoke a lot about Keith Haring, and so maybe I'm feeling some residual
little on the
feelings
brain,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But yeah, I have it hanging on my wall right now, and I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I did that, and I'm happy
Yeah.
about it. And there's going to be a whole video about it, so it's
Oh,
really
cool.
cool. And so the next piece is the Tree of Life. It's an ink drawing that I did. Usually when I do drawings, I do them in the stencilized style. It kind of speaks to how I feel about art and how I fit into art,
Mm.
because in school the art we were taught was extremely Eurocentric. We were never taught about any people of color or indigenous artists. We never learned about any of that. It was all Monets, Manets, Van Goghs,
Mm-hmm.
um, typically men on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
typically not overly characterized as queer artists. And I was always told, if you can't paint like this, if you can't draw like this, you are not an artist. You don't deserve art.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't make money from it, don't bother.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave up on art for a while, and it used to be this beautiful outlet for me. And I just didn't have that kind of support, especially from school where you're supposed to get support. You're
Mhm.
supposed to follow your dreams. And I thought if I couldn't draw a portrait, then I shouldn't be drawing. Then I'm not good at it at all. And then I got to this point where I stopped giving a fuck, and I was like, no, I like how this works. I like how these shapes work on their own, but together they create this beautiful image and they build up like a community does. And
Mm.
it's a very common theme in my work is that my work is very piecemeal if you just identify each little thing, but together it builds up to something greater. And I love trees. Uh, they make me feel safe. They make me feel fresh and happy, and so I draw them a lot.
Mhm.
And yeah, that one just is very lush and it flourishes and it has all of this movement and rhythm in it. So I called it the Tree of Life. The next piece is Black Tortoise. It's actually a milestone piece for me. I'm very proud of it. I was part of the color palette, part of the Indie Studio residency at Sketch, and then
Mm.
our exhibition was put on hold because of COVID. It was supposed to take place in March 2020, and it was called Color Palette. We ended up doing it in 2021 between February and March, and it was a virtual gallery. And that was the piece that I worked towards because I was forcing myself to come out of, no pun intended, out of the shell of being held under this thumb of what art really is and if I'm allowed to call myself an artist. And I like working with different mediums. I like mixing things together because that's really who I am. I'm a person that is made up all of these different pieces, and that's what makes Ashley. And Black Tortoise is actually autobiographical because all of the small tortoises that are marching, again, I've introduced more rhythm. It's made up of 21 different canvases that I've bonded together,
Mm.
and it's about the traumas that I've been through in my life and all of the colors. I did research on awareness colors, so like how baby pink is for breast cancer awareness.
Right.
I did research on different traumas and what happens when you blend those colors together. So there's misogynoir there, there's self-harm, there's mental health, there's violence, and the rainbow, it's supposed to be a collection of how we perceive a rainbow as beautiful. People look at this and they're like, oh my God, it's so cute. All of those little turtles and the rainbow, and it's so pretty. And I'm like, it's about how we mask our pain and how society just brushes over all of these traumas and all of these issues that people deal with. And what I did is that I am the tortoise.
Mm.
I'm that little tortoise that no one was there to protect me from all these pains. And I carry the weight on my back of all those traumas and those pieces, the shell. And but I keep marching forward. They're all marching in the same direction and marching forward. And then I finally become balanced and whole. And I still wear those scars on my back, but I've actually physically grown above my traumas, and I still carry them with me. They still make me who I am, but I'm still marching
You
forward.
still keep moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, I think it's, you brought this up, but like all three of your pieces, and I think a lot of your work has this really interesting sort of you called it piecemeal, I think, but I also kind of look at it as like layering.
Yes.
And like everything is like a part of the greater whole, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And I find that really interesting because right away you name yourself as the bifecta, as your all these different pieces that make up this thing. And it's so sort of like, I think it can be really complicated, right?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like people from the outside is like, oh, you have all of these labels and you're all of these things, and maybe it seems like a lot, but in the end, it creates this sort of like beautiful, composed work, you know?
Yeah. And that it's if you look at more of my portfolio, one painting from another, one drawing from another can be very different in subject matter, but it still very much has my signature in it, because there's so much movement, because I've had to teach myself to keep moving forward. Like your other guest said last week, we are sharks. We cannot stop moving. And that's very much part of my signature, and very much the layering and the piecemeal and the overlooked tiny objects that built into this other larger composition. That is very much part of my signature.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna bring on Alice. Hopefully they're ready to go. And we're gonna show some art that's very different from this, but it's gonna be great. I'm gonna let you go take a little break or whatever you need. Let me hold on, let me pull this out and I will switch people and I'll bring Alice on for a second. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we'll bring Alice. Hi.
I'm back.
You're back. How was that? How was your little break? Do you feel refreshed?
It was great. I got to
Great.
pet the dog a little.
Oh, good.
got to
Okay.
do a little bio work. It was nice.
Good. Love firework. Okay, let's put it that way. So I'm gonna show, and I will give like an adult content warning, I guess, for this one. There's language. It's adult comedy, so if anybody has like children in the room, maybe put your headphones on or whatever. But I'm gonna put this on. We won't be able to see you, but we will hear you. So just so you know. But is this a recent comedy sketch? It looks like it's pretty recent.
It is. This is actually my first time back on a stage after
Amazing.
COVID. So this was 3 weeks ago at the Diving Bell Social Club in Montreal.
I love Montreal. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this on, and this is about a 2-minute quick clip. So everyone gird your loins or whatever.
And he turned and said, "Watch where you're going, cunt." And I felt so validated. Montreal, I was wrong about you. I love you. I love you. It's hard enough going out into the world every day looking like a lesbian porn parody Tina Fey. Like a Les Lemon, if you will. Let alone getting back up on stage to talk to drunken strangers when I know that all they're wondering is, does she still have a penis between her legs? And not that it's anyone's business, but I don't. I have a penis between my butt cheeks because I'm a lady. Thank you. I wasn't about that boarding toilet paper life, so I just cut out the middleman and I bought a bidet. Work smart, not hard, ladies. Also, can you believe we've just been wiping this entire time? Please tell me, somebody puts poop on any part of your body, are you just gonna dry wipe it off and keep walking? No. That's it. This bidet changed my life. But when I got it, I didn't realize the model that I had bought, and it had this little dial on it. And it said that the dial had like nozzle and something, and then it said female mode. And I'm like, you can just turn it on and off? But being the second generation Karen that I am, I couldn't help it. I had to call the company. And it turns out they actually did initially release this model with a vagina mode, but they had to do a massive recall because of a class action lawsuit by all of the confused straight men trying to have sex with it.
Well, that was a whole thing. I have many questions, and I don't. Okay, so I'm not okay. I will be honest. I don't see a lot of comedy. A lot of comedy for me is like, I don't get it. I feel like I don't know. I'm not a very funny person. But there was a few of those moments. A lot of the things I find funny when people do comedy is the reaction of the audience, right? And you probably think so too. Like I can just imagine being up there and certain things you say and being able to see people's faces, I imagine is so funny for you.
Oh, it's the biggest thrill. It's why I do it, and it's why I've been so sad in the last year and a half because I don't get to observe that live. I do now, but I haven't been able to really engage with audiences in that way. And you can see from that clip, there was somebody obviously close to the camera that was filming who just had this amazing laugh. Like it was a woo! And I wanted to find them and buy them a drink afterwards because obviously that made the show for everybody. They just brought this energy and it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, a couple of my favorite moments in there, like the pause, and you could sense the uncomfortableness of the audience when you were like, "Oh, I know you want to hear if I have a penis or not." And there was like a palpable, the audience not knowing if they were allowed to laugh or clap or what. And you could tell everybody was like, "What am I supposed to do right now?" And then you finished your joke, and I think that whole like release of everybody being like, "Oh, phew, I'm allowed to laugh. This wasn't gonna be offensive to anybody." Do you know what I mean? Like, I love those moments of the audience being like, "Is this funny? Am I? Wait." Like, those moments are so pure to me.
Yeah, and that I love doing that sort of bait and switch
Yeah.
on emotions. And I realized it like a couple weeks ago I stopped in at this great place for a coffee, for like a flat white or whatever.
Whatever, Karen.
And I left the coffee shop and I had a sip and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. This is like the greatest flat white or cortado I've had. Perfect." So I'm like, "Okay." And I put my mask on and I went back into the store and I went back up to the barista and I was like, "Okay, I just had to come back because I've been a barista for 3 years. I have had coffee throughout Toronto. And I have to say, hands down, this is the best coffee I've had in the city so far." But the way I delivered it, I could see the barista's face like, "Oh no, oh no, this woman's gonna, is she gonna throw it in my face?"
Right.
Like I came back with the energy of an angry Karen,
Yeah.
but then I realized afterwards, it's like, yeah, I have a tendency to do that. I love misleading people and I like allowing a little bit of relief as well.
Yeah, I mean that's for sure my favorite of that little like a little bit. And like the weird thing is, right? Like we've known each other for about a year, maybe less, but I've never
Mm.
seen you do a set because
Oh, really?
COVID,
Yeah.
right? Like I
And
don't
I've
really
never
have,
seen you perform burlesque.
yeah. So I've never really had the ability to. So even seeing that little cut up set that you sent me, I was like, "Oh, they do the you really do the setup, wait for it, and then drop it on them," which I like love. Like I said, like sometimes comedy, like the super pitter patter, it's almost like, I don't know, I don't process it fast enough or something, but the way you like, "Here's a joke about my penis, wait for it. Don't worry, I got you." Like it feels like it's that,
Yeah,
like you feel like the you make everybody uncomfortable for a second, and I think that's so good for comedy in a way.
it is. And I think that's, talking about my advocacy and something I did in that set, for one of the first times that I didn't include in the clip was talking about, how I feel to be a Canadian. This fell the weekend after Canada Day, and I addressed like I didn't want to celebrate Canada Day this year because I actually don't feel very proud to be Canadian. And I addressed that, and I addressed the imbalance of, sharing of stories and sharing of voices,
Mhm.
that even though I'm up here being celebrated as a trans woman with weird stories and odd perspectives and like disgusting jokes, um I can't feel like queer people are being celebrated because there are still so many queer voices that are being silenced. There are so many BIPOC voices that are being silenced.
Mhm.
There are so many indigenous voices. So there was about a 5 minute, 3 minute period where I wasn't telling any jokes. And I
Mhm.
was just like, look, I have to get this off my chest. I have to talk about it. And then starting to build it back up and make jokes and show that
Yeah.
like I got it off my chest and now we can ease off a little bit about it. um that's for me a really good tool to be able to advocate frankly and bluntly. And I can tell jokes to make people like me or at least be on board with me. And then I can slip in the facts, the hard truths, and then end with a little laugh to be like, remember, I'm still funny. But I told you a little something. You know, I maybe checked your privilege or I checked some stereotypes that people probably came in with.
I mean, I think that's like, and this is gonna sound so cliche because everyone fucking says this, but I think that's the purpose of art in a lot of ways. And to me, comedy is art. And we, we dance about it or paint about it or we tell jokes about it, but ultimately we're trying to express something about the human condition. Oh, it felt gross even coming out of my mouth, how cliche that was. But in the end, we're trying to like, and that's to me like important. So your and I think it's really valuable that your whatever your set length is, your 8 minute set, your 10 minute set, isn't like ha 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 ha. It's here's some shit that we got to talk about, but isn't it funny that X? But also, now that I got you on board, let me tell you a bit about this. Like, I think all of that is like so, like, that kind of art really does it to me. Where it's like, now that I have your attention, may I present to you fucking racism? Do you know what I mean?
Right. And that's why I do like to write material and I do like to explore material. Very early on, I was trying to speak to my experiences with sexual assault
Yeah.
in contrast to a lot of the attitudes that the male comics were bringing to the stage, saying, like, wow, that was uncomfortable for half the audience, wasn't it? And then sharing my experiences in a very raw way and then trying to come back to it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's my gimmick, I guess. I love talking about the stereotypes of trans people, the stereotypes of race, being in a relationship with a queer Black woman, cultural differences, and everything like that. Like, those are things that are important to me. And like you said, human condition, blah.
Yeah.
But
Right.
honestly, not to go off topic too much, but honestly, everybody engages with the natural, environmental, physical, spiritual world on their own terms and
Mm-hmm.
and as shaped by their own experiences. So every person is a story.
Yeah.
Every person is a unique and beautiful expression of the capacities of the human condition, of the boundaries of the human condition. We all have a story to tell. We all
Mm-hmm.
have something that we're passionate about or that we believe in that we can contribute to other people. And I think
Yeah.
everyone is an artist in that way.
And hearing like any kind of like different perspective, like I think that especially with comedy, earlier in my burlesque career, a lot of times they would shove comedy and burlesque on the same bill. And very often I would follow like some dude making like rape jokes. And I had to get on stage after that and take my clothes off. And I would do it because at the time I was like, well, it's a gig. And I would never do that anymore. If somebody like made those kind of jokes, like getting on stage, hi Kyle. After that, that would be not a thing. But when you're an artist or you're just getting gigs or you're new to a scene, you don't know what's okay. So it's so, especially with like comedy for me, because I think the first experience I had of it was a lot of like cis white dudes and how funny women's bodies are, or how funny it is to make fun of femmes or whatever it may be, or the gays. And going on stage after that to take off your clothes is like, I remember feeling so gross about that. So I think particularly now that I hope, and maybe it's just because I surround myself with really cool people, I feel like that's changing a lot and comedy can't get away with that bullshit anymore. At least not on a major scale. I don't know.
Hmm. It really can't. And I have to, I've had very similar experiences when people are making
Yeah.
rape jokes or very homophobic statements or very transphobic statements. And then I have to, especially when the audience is on board and they're laughing and they're validating these
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah.
And then I have to come up and bare my soul and talk about my girl dick to this
Yeah.
audience that I know is against me because they were on board with the previous comic.
Yeah.
And that's such a weird place to be in.
Yeah.
That's such an uncomfortable, unsafe feeling
Yeah.
place to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to
And when
bring
I
that, I'm sorry I brought that conversation
no,
right down,
no,
but
that's fine. And
yeah.
yes, trigger warnings and content warnings, of course. But I mean, I remember having that feeling where I look out at an audience and I don't feel safe
Yeah.
because nobody in this audience has my back.
Yeah. It's,
And they've
yeah.
proven it for the rest of the show.
It's really scary to go on
Yeah.
after when somebody is not laughing with, but laughing at, queer folks or
Right.
women or the vulnerability of women or like, isn't it funny? Like, I remember how it used to be funny. Oh, I would follow a woman home just to see how funny that reaction was. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's not a joke. And I heard jokes about that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Those people obviously don't know women.
Yeah, right? Just, yeah. Anyways, okay, I'm gonna bring Ashley back on again. Hello, everybody. I don't like this weird view. I'm gonna do this one. It like makes us into like an Oreo. And it's weird. It's a weird like. Anyways, okay. Hello, Kyle. Welcome to the chat. How's it going? Okay, so I would like to. I definitely want to hear. We're running a little bit low on time, but we've got time. I want to do one more like group question, and I'd love to hear some poetry if that's still okay.
Yeah.
And I still want to show your thing. Okay, but let me do a group question real quick. This is a question that I also asked last week, but this is one of my favorite questions. And I think really empowering for people to think about, I hope, for you. I'd love to know when I guess in both of your cases, you both do all kinds of different kinds of art. You're community builders, you produce, you write, you perform, but I'd love for you to think about like the sort of one practice that is front of mind right now for you, and tell me about when you sort of fell in love with that one thing, be it burlesque or painting or stand-up comedy or producing. And then tell me when you realized, oh wait, I'm good at this thing I love. So again, whoever wants to lead, go ahead and jump in.
Sure. I guess I'll go with visual art painting. I have been in love with it since I was an absolute child. My brother has always been my biggest cheerleader. He bought me my first easel. He used to always buy me sketchbooks and journals and always told me to keep up with my art and keep up with my writing. But that easel ended up getting broken during one of my moves, so that made me really sad. But it was one of my greatest treasures. And yeah, I've been in love with painting since I was little. And like I mentioned before, because of a lack of support, especially from teachers and other people, I kind of put it on the side for a while and then came kind of back to it in a wishy-washy way because I just liked the way it felt to drag a brush across a canvas. But I kept reusing the same canvas because I would never allow myself to like anything I created. And then I think I really came into loving my art and realizing I'm actually good probably in 2020 when we all
Wow.
thought 2020 was going to be our year. Because that was the year when I decided that I was going to stop being afraid of how people were going to receive me and receive my art, whether it was burlesque or painting or anything else. And I signed up for the indie studio residency. I got accepted into it, and I was surrounded by a lot of other artists who were emerging who appreciated what I created, and I appreciated their art as well. And so I was in, for the first time, a proper environment that helped me harness my creativity and appreciate my own creativity instead of always giving it to other people and giving that appreciation outwards. And yeah, and then I just said, fuck it. I'm just gonna start putting things out there. I'm gonna apply for things. And I've won a lot of grants. I've won a lot of gigs and a lot of different things where people said, yes, you are good enough. We are going to publish you. We are going to put a picture of your art somewhere. We're going to hang up your art somewhere. And I think it's been extremely important and monumental for me and my mental health as an artist that I was able to accomplish this during the pandemic,
Mm.
that I didn't believe in myself long before when I could actually have access to resources. And I said, you know what? If no one's coming to my rescue, I have to come to my own, and did this on my own. And so it kind of even further reinforced the fact that I was like, you know what? I am an artist. I'm allowed to use that label. I'm allowed to identify myself that career wise and personality wise, and just go with that. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but very recent um, achievement in appreciating my own work.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, right? Because I think that a lot of people, right, and this happens across art forms, people who have been like working and working and working for years and doing their thing, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, they get one grant or they get something, and everybody's like, who the fuck is this person? Where'd they come from? That person didn't come from nowhere. That person has been existing and making forever. And they finally, I don't know, had somebody tell them they were good enough or believed in themselves that they were good enough or had a kick in the pants in some way or the other. Like that whole bullshit of like, oh, they just showed up overnight. That's basically never true.
Oh, there's no such thing as an overnight
Yeah,
success.
yeah.
Never.
Like
Yeah.
there's not except for maybe like somebody who comes from a shit ton of wealth and like their daddy gave them $1 million to make a painting or something. But that never happens, right? That's not a thing that any of us have access to. That doesn't happen. Like it's somebody working and working and working and then finally getting this little shred of opportunity to do their thing, you know? So yeah, it's so good to hear. And I love that you have like taken 2020 and found that like magic in it because so many of us have like found the fucking other side of that coin. So love that. And okay, we're running out of time. I don't want to talk too long myself, but also everyone needs to celebrate their fucking friends' victories, right? That's so important to me is like it's so important for your friends to love your work. Like, it's nice to do a show when your audience likes your work, but for your friends to pump you up and to be like, oh my God, I see you. Look what you just did is so awesome. Like, it means the world. I don't know. I feel like both of you are nodding and you agree, but like, it's a big deal for people close to you to be like, I see what you're doing and it's so good.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Your friends and your peers. I think
Yeah,
your peer acceptance and peer appreciation is so important.
it's huge.
And it's important for the self too. Like if you don't know how to celebrate the successes of your peers, you're going to have a very lonely, sad, fragile career
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you're always thinking them versus me.
yeah. Yeah, and that happens in every frigging community. And it's hard to
Mhm.
see as somebody who I think kind of like you, Ashley, has jumped around with a few different communities and poked my little nose in different places and been like, oh, that like shady behavior happens everywhere. But you know, the cream rises to the top in the end, you know? And like that's so nice to see of like good people doing the work and getting the credit, you know? I love that. Okay,
Mhm.
Alice, tell me, when did you fall in love with comedy? Do you remember, I don't know, seeing Richard Pryor, I don't know, when you were 10 and being like, I want to do that shit? I don't know. I don't know what the comedy equivalent is. And when did you like do a thing where you were like, ah, dang, I'm good at this?
Okay, growing up, my favorite comedian was Jim Carrey, so we're
Okay.
gonna skip past that,
Why?
and we're gonna
Is
pretend
Jim
it was
Carrey
always
problematic?
Robin Williams. No, he's just a very big, he's not. He's a cartoonish.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
not much of a refined comedian. He's incredible. But I've always loved, especially stand-up comedy. I've loved the joke um concentration of stand-up comedy where it's like I'm here to tell jokes and just remembering like big deep laughs coming out
Mm.
of somebody's closing joke. But it wasn't until I saw, and this isn't I didn't make this up, but the very first stand-up comedy show that I saw live featured Al Val.
Oh,
And the first time I saw her performing, I was like, it can be good. Like, it can be this cool. Because,
I hope she sees this. I will send it to her anyway.
yeah, I tell her all the time.
Okay,
So
good.
it's okay. And yeah, um, when I produced my first show, Alval agreed to be on the lineup, and she had just come out as queer, and it was a queer show, and it was so serendipitous to me. I loved it. Um, but yeah, I fell in love with stand up when I hated it for the first 3 months. I thought
Hmm.
it was the worst. It was awkward. I had such anxiety, such stage fright that it was like this isn't worth it. But there was one time I was just comfortable and I felt a flow and I knew the material that I needed and I was off of my book and I just sat on a stool, made myself comfortable, and was just like, I'm going to be real with you. This is what I want to talk about, and making jokes throughout. And it reached the audience
Yeah.
for the first time. And then the time I realized I was good at what I do was when I talked about my experiences with sexual assault.
Mm.
So um I was booked on a show. I showed up and they had bumped me for the following week for other comics. And the entire lineup of comics were straight white men making rape jokes, making very
Oh.
misogynistic jokes, being just very, very uncomfortable. So it
Yeah.
was almost like the producer knew I wouldn't really gel with this crowd.
Mhm.
Um, so I was booked the following week. So I went back the next week with a full set about sexual abuse and sexual assault. And when I got to talk and open up in a very raw way about the time that I was sexually assaulted, and I got to share that with people and the silence, the absolute silence that filled the room until I kind of shamed them into laughing at a rape joke at the end. And I'm like, yeah, you are terrible people. You're not.
Yeah.
You're terrible. Just being able to elicit a range of emotions, not just shallow laughter, but to elicit thought, to elicit reflection, to elicit that tension. That's when I felt like I had something going. Now I never feel like I'm a good comic. I may never feel I'm so, I such self doubt and such imposter syndrome. But I think that's all artists
Mhm.
in a way, because we're so close to our work
Yeah.
and we don't see the progress like everyone else does. When you create something, you've leveled up to the level that that creation is. And you always see the next step as your goal. So you're always aiming for that next step.
So we all see ourselves as like a level 2 bard, but really we're like a good like level 13 or something.
Yeah.
I brought it back to
Yeah.
D&D, guys.
Here
Love
for it.
that. Love that.
Okay, we're gonna do 2 more things today. If you have like 10 more minutes for me, what I'd like to do is, Alice, I'm gonna pull you out again, and Ashley, if you don't mind, I'm gonna show your teaser real quick, and take a few sentences about that. And I'm so sorry to have to rush you, but I don't want to hold people longer than I promised. And then if you'd mind, you wouldn't mind sharing like maybe one spoken word piece with us,
Yeah.
and then we're
definitely.
gonna do a little wrap up all together. Is that cool?
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, Alice, I'm going to pull you out for a second. And then, Ashley, I'm going to show you a little teaser here. And I want to hear really quick about that because that's my first love. And that's how we met, is sort of through the burlesque scene. So I'd love to hear a few sentences about that. And I'd love to hear your piece after that. So let me just pull this up and show. Where is it? Here it is. So this is. Actually, maybe you can introduce. So this is a teaser for what? Tell me. It was for. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I was one of the selected artists to work with the Queer Youth Cabaret through Soul Pepper Theater, and we put on this piece called Queer Futures 2099. And it was a question to the artists who participated of what does queerness look like in the year 2099? What is a queer futurism? And my piece is called Colorful Existence. And I combined my spoken word and poetry with my background in burlesque. And so children don't need to worry. I've clipped it in certain spaces. And so like this is a little teaser that I put together of it. It took place back in June. So yeah, this little
So let me
video.
show the teaser and then we'll talk about what the final piece was.
Yeah.
And
Whoops, that's Alice. That's not you. This one. Sorry, try again.
Have you heard the news? That's right, there is no news. Only our colorful existence.
So it's a real like little, I love the like, it's a real teaser because you're like, wait, what? Because the portion of you is such even a small section of the teaser, right? So can you tell me just really quick, again, sorry to rush you, about what the resultant actual piece was?
Yeah. So basically the poem is talking about the future, but not as we usually speak about it, of like, wouldn't it be nice? My poem speaks about, no, this is what we have accomplished based off of the work we're doing now in 2021 and all the years before that. All of the work that artists and lovers and activists were doing now, it's actually realized in that year. It's not a, oh, it would be nice if this is what we could accomplish. It exists. And it calls to attention that like one of the lines is that binders are sold amongst the negligee and the boxers. There's no assumption. And things of queerness just exist without question. And we're no longer celebrating just human decency, because human decency happens. It's not something that we're starved for, so it doesn't make headlines anymore. And the first line is, have you heard the news? That's right, there is no news. Because we're not sensationalizing people just being good people, because we've removed all of this bullshit that makes us have to cower and fear the people that we truly are. And it's just this beautiful, colorful existence. And throughout the piece, I start off, I'm nude with pasties, of course, but I'm nude. My hair is out, it's natural, and my body is bare. And as I go on and I speak my stanzas, paint pours down over my body. And there's even a very particular part where I focus on my feet and it's covered in red and pink. And it says that rape culture is dead. These are all these beautiful things that we've accomplished. And I have a very like plain, stern face throughout the whole piece, and it goes all over my body, showing that this is my natural body. I'm not wearing shapers. You see all of my curves, all of my lumps, all my bumps. And it closes in on me at the end. And I just turn to the simplest smirk, because this is what it is. And it ends.
I adore that. I love aspirational art where people are like, we are fighting for the rights of people. But I'm really, and what I do is stuff like that I love is like we create a world where those things already have happened, right? That's what I tried to do with my D&D and trying to do with a lot of our burlesque plays, is just like queer folk and people of color and people of all shapes, sizes, abilities, divergencies, they just exist and they are. And I know that that's a fantasy. I know that we don't live in that world yet. But oh boy, is it fun to play in it and to pretend for a little bit. But would you like to give us a quick spoken word piece?
Yeah, I'll out of the two, I'll do the shorter one because we're low on time.
Okay, I'm gonna pull myself off and let you do your thing. So let me get out of here and take the stage.
Okay. So this piece is called An Ode to the Flag. Pink is for every femme, she, her, and them, that I have awkwardly admired, sweating through my courage, trying to compliment more than her shoes, but my train of thought gets derailed deep inside her boobs. Lavender is for every other who fits in no box label or cover. That may be the exception on the form, but has not been accepted, only accepted into my crush swarm. Blue is for a select number of guys, the straights, the pans, especially the bis, that with whom I seemingly have no trouble, to the point where I'm no longer awkward or humble, watching them try to compliment my shoes as their train of thought gets derailed deep inside my boobs. Thank you.
I want to see that. I want to see that live. I want to see you on a stage with somebody controlling the colors. I just saw that happen in my mind. I'm sorry for like putting my own vision on your work, but yes, as another, like, I consider myself pan. I know pan, bi, those terms are sort of interchangeable for a lot of people, but I love that. And especially the select few guys. Yes. Like, no tea, no shade, but a little bit.
But yeah, it's select number of guys.
Yeah.
But it's also, this is a piece that I wrote that is super tongue-in-cheek,
I love it.
but it's also, every queerdo in the audience was just like, hot damn, I feel attacked.
You know?
None of us know how to identify when we're being hit on.
Yeah.
None of us know how to properly just like be smooth and be queer and just be like, yo, what's up?
Yeah.
No, it's just like most of my queer women friends don't know how to do bra shopping because they get stuck looking at the models. Like,
Just at me next time.
right? Come at me, bro. Like that, it's this cute short way of saying, I see you, I am you, we're awkward as fuck. Can I get your number?
Also, do you want to hang out sometime?
Right? I don't know, like watch Sense8 or something.
You know? Oh, yeah, amazing. Okay, I'm bringing Alice back in. They're just in the background being like, poetry. I don't care. JK, they're not doing that.
Oh, I do care. I
Just
care
fucking
so
with you.
much.
You know, comedy is just poetry with more puns. Is it? It's not. No, it's not.
There are similarities, and I do draw inspiration from a lot of poetry and a lot of hip hop, actually.
Yeah.
There's so much comedy in hip hop and in absurdist and existentialist literature like Kafka and Sartre, and I just
Because
those
it's
are
all
like,
about
they're
language and
comedy.
rhythm, right? It's all about using these words and
Right.
oftentimes taking words that are used against us and using it back, right?
Yes. And exploring double entendres, exploring symbolism of words, exploring sort of subversive ideas, exploring expectations, exploring like shared expectations, and then delivering new ones and seeing things in a new light. And it's all connected, man. It's all out there, man.
Okay. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to really quick announce who's coming on next week, and then I'd love to give us your parting words, and I'll throw all your links again in the chat. And then we'll say goodbye, if that's cool. Okay, so next week I'm really excited because my partner, Sly, is gonna come on and talk about all of their amazing work. They're like the only person in the world who I trust to take a photo of me. They're incredible, and they have basically a photography studio, photography presence, and they do sort of creative photography and boudoir stuff for everybody and everyone. Certain somebody here has had her picture taken by Sly, and Alice, you should too, because honestly, Sly is... And somebody who I've made recent friends with, who I don't know if he's still here hanging out in chat, but Kyle from Play Nerd Allies, who is one of my like new friendies in the TTRPG community, and he was just on my game, and also comes from a theater background, and we talk about like how art, you know, facilitates our work in D&D and RPG. So I made a little trailer, so I'm just gonna show it, and then we'll say goodbye. So hold on. Okay, here it comes. So that's next week, and y'all should come hang out. And of course, I need to mention real quick the music maker in my life, Yehenda, who you both, I think, know and love. You know, he writes me music, and he's incredible at it. So if anybody's looking for music for their shows or their streams or whatever, hit him up. So let me post that in here real quick. That. Okay. And then I hate to say it, but like I guess we should say our goodbyes. Does anybody want to get rid of me first? Whoever wants to jump in, tell me what you're looking forward to, where people should go to find you right now, etc., etc. I don't know. I guess Ashley, you just talk, so Alice, give it to me.
Sure. You can find me at Alice Rose Laughs on all platforms. Check out my current production. I said I was going to be quick for this, but now I'm nervous. My current production, The Breakout Room. It's a national online comedy competition that happens every Wednesday until the showcase on September 8th. Also, I'm very excited to announce that I am starting a new series in partnership with Review Cinemas in Toronto called Hold Up, where I invite a funny friend or a really cool friend to rewatch one of their favorite comedy movies from their childhood. And we talk about representation and stereotype, and we kind of ask ourselves, does the comedy hold up? Hence the name. So check that out with Review Cinemas. You can find information on everything at comicsansproductions.ca.
Amazing. Alice, I'm so happy I met you over this past year. What you do really inspires me, and it's so nice to like work with you when I can.
Yes, I'm so happy I've met you, and you've shaped me so much in the last year. And maybe we'll watch your favorite comedy movie some night.
Oh my
Who
God.
knows?
Which is, oh my God, can you do Empire Records?
Okay, you're booked. I love it. I
I
love
have
it.
so
Yeah.
much to say about it.
Oh my, yes. Okay, I'm
Okay, amazing. Done. Okay,
writing
okay,
that down as soon as I'm off screen.
done. Okay, Ashley, I'm gonna paste your links in, but tell me where people can find you, what you're focusing on now, whatever you want to say as your closing remarks.
You can mostly find me on Instagram, primarily at Bifusion Arts, but as Stella's just put into the chat, you can find all my stuff through my link tree under Bifecta. You'll find my performance stuff there, my literary, anything I have upcoming for performance wise, and it'll link you to my website where you can see more of my portfolio for my visual art. Right now, just trying to get that stuff together to enter the Bifecta exhibition. I'm also working alongside Art Starts. I'm a facilitator for some kitties, and they warm my heart. They're so wonderful. And I am actually working with the Concerned Kids to combine their level of ages, because they work with younger children, and Bountiful Pride, I work with adults to do some programming for 2022 Black History Month. And so I'm extremely excited about that. I think it's going to be really wonderful, and we'll be creating some community workshops. So pay attention to my posts, and I'll let you know when stuff becomes open. And if you are Black, queer, over the age of 30 and in Toronto, there are still a few more workshops for the Art of Blackness going on right now. You can find that through the Bountiful Pride Instagram, and you can also find the events on Facebook. Won't take up any more of your time, but thank you so much for having me on this show. It was wonderful, Stella, and thank you for letting me share a bit of my story.
I love this. Yeah, it's so nice to hang out with people like I admire, and hopefully like a couple of people like pop in and be like, look at these cool people. And I can just be like, I know. And it's just about like, people need, it's really hard to amplify artists, especially now. And I hope that even if two more people find out about your awesomeness from this, then like I'll have done my work. And TBH, it inspires me to talk to people who are inspiring. So I appreciate you so much for being here, both of you. I can't wait to see how your work progresses. And you know me, I'll be in the front row for anything you do once we're allowed. As for me, you all know where to find me. You can find me as Saint Stella everywhere, sometimes with an underscore between, but usually not. When am I back on the internet? I'm back on the internet. Saturday at the Games Tavern playing a guest in that game. I'm going to be Sunday night. I'll be modding a conversation over at the Hope for TTRPGs channel. And then I'll be back next Wednesday with a D&D game, and next Thursday with Kyle and Sly talking about their artworks. So thank you again so much. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you, Alice and Ashley. I appreciate you all so much. Everybody keep making art and keep taking care of yourself, okay? Y'all
Thanks.
matter.